What a man thinks when he discovers your dignity is stronger than your love for him isn't pretty, isn't tender, and isn't pleasant. It's devastating to his ego, because here he doesn't just lose affection, he loses an internal position that gave him security without effort. This video doesn't exist to comfort you or inflate your self-esteem. It exists to show you the exact psychological mechanism that activates when he realizes he can no longer have you at any price. And when that happens, nothing feels the same for either of you anymore. Here you'll hear the 6 real mental stages his mind goes through when your dignity prevails, from initial confusion to internal breakdown, all the way to the point where the dynamic reverses forever. If you leave before the end, you'll miss the most dangerous and decisive part, the one that separates the woman who gives in again from the woman who will never be taken for granted again. This isn't just any content, it's the message you need to hear in full if you don't want to lose yourself to love again. Carl Jung, the great explorer of the human psyche, warned that no one confronts another human being without first confronting their own shadow. And that's exactly what happens here. Your dignity forces him to see what he'd been avoiding, that part of himself he couldn't control because he was controlling you. If any of this is resonating, subscribe and write "I'm reading" in the comments. That way YouTube understands this reflection deserves to continue. Everything you'll hear in this video is explored in depth in the book The Art of Detachment, where you'll discover how to reclaim your power when someone you love pulls away, how to return to yourself even when the bond seems unbreakable. If you recognize in yourself that woman who got lost, the complete path is waiting in the description. Because if you listen to this at the right moment, it doesn't just change your mood, it changes the inner structure from which you love. First stage, the moment of silent awareness. Listen carefully, because this shatters a widespread fantasy. A man doesn't realize he's losing you when you leave. He realizes it when he can no longer move you internally. It's not a phrase, not a stated boundary, not an emotional scene. It's a silent shift in internal position, and when it happens, he feels it long before he can put it into words. Let me make this concrete with a real case. Chris Bell came to counseling with a story that repeats more often than you'd imagine. She was affectionate, deep, committed. She didn't beg, didn't chase, didn't make scenes. From the outside, anyone would have said she had dignity. But internally, she was negotiating in silence, justifying absences, waiting too long, tolerating small inconsistencies so as not to be inconvenient, until something changed. Not outside, but inside. And that movement triggered the first real break in his mind. For years, Chris Bell confused patience with mature love. She thought understanding meant giving in, that adapting meant caring. And without realizing it, she taught her internal system and his that her space could stretch without breaking. Every long wait, every lukewarm response, every accumulated "it's fine" formed a silent dynamic. There was no malice, but there was no growth either, because when you adapt too much, the other person never feels the urgency to get their act together. And this is felt, even when it's not said. The break didn't arrive with a slammed door or tears. It came the day Chris Bell stopped over-explaining herself. Something didn't sit right with her, and she no longer justified it. Something irritated her, and she no longer swallowed it. She didn't leave, didn't threaten, didn't complain. She simply stopped betraying herself in small things. This gesture, invisible yet radical, reconfigures everything. Because when you return to yourself, your energy stops asking, stops adjusting so the other won't leave. And this is felt like an immediate loss of access. Here appears the first male mental reaction. It's not fear yet, it's discomfort. He doesn't understand what's changed. He only feels that something no longer reacts the same way. Your silence weighs differently. Your boundaries don't sound defensive. Your presence no longer offers itself like before. And this forces him to observe, not to take care of you, but to reposition himself. Because when a woman stops being negotiable without announcing it, the man faces a new sensation. The dynamic he took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Jung would say that at this point the shadow activates, that part of the psyche that reacts when it loses emotional control. Not domination, access. He doesn't think "I'll lose her." He thinks something deeper. I no longer understand from what position to relate to her. Before, when Chris Bell left, he lost a woman. Now when she left, he lost a comfortable internal position. And this is more unsettling than physical absence. Because love can be replaced, but embodied dignity? No. It's important you see this clearly. This doesn't happen when you leave. It happens when you make 3 internal moves. You stop staying where your body tenses to maintain the relationship. You stop explaining yourself to someone unwilling to listen. You start making small decisions aligned with yourself, even if he doesn't like them. Not to provoke, but to respect yourself. And when you do this, you don't become cold, you become clear. And clarity is deeply intimidating to someone who is comfortable in your emotional ambiguity. The man starts measuring, observing timing, words, reactions. Not because you're manipulating him, but because you've stopped manipulating yourself to keep him. Here his fantasy breaks, she's always there. When that certainty falls, his mind goes on alert. It's not love yet, it's recalibration. because no one values what seems unconditional, but they do value what has silent boundaries. I think this is the true beginning of psychological respect. Many women believe dignity is hardness. No, dignity is internal coherence maintained over time. Crispell didn't become distant, she became whole. And that activated a dangerous question in him. What place do I hold now? You're no longer a reaction, you're a presence. You no longer chase, you choose. And this constant choosing, without words, disarms every dynamic based on comfort. And there's no punishment here, there's structure. And structure brings more order than any declaration of love. This step is silent but irreversible, because once your system learns, it doesn't have to strain to love, it can't go back. He feels it, even if he doesn't name it. He knows something has changed, that he can no longer count on your emotional flexibility. And this forces him to define himself, grow or withdraw. Both options are born from the same point, your return to yourself, not from an external threat, but from an integrity that's no longer negotiable. I want you to hold this phrase as an anchor, because it changes the entire board. I don't have to leave to stop being negotiable. I have to return to myself. When you integrate that, the bond stops being sustained by inertia, and the male mind, losing its comfort, begins to compare not you with the past, but with any other woman who doesn't embody this level of coherence. And there begins something even deeper. Second stage, the break in the comfortable dynamic. It hurts, but it liberates. Love without structure becomes landscape. It's there, it sustains, but it doesn't order. What truly reorganizes a man's mind is the internal form from which you love. When you love without abandoning yourself, when you don't shrink to adapt, he can no longer read you from comfort. And this silent, firm change weighs more than any emotional promise you made before. The common mistake is believing that giving more love generates more commitment. No, it generates more habit. Dignity, however, introduces a new variable, consequence. Not punishment, not coldness, coherence. Jung explained that the psyche respects what has contour. When you have clear internal boundaries, the other perceives that something exists he cannot cross without transforming. And this awakens respect even before desire, because now he doesn't possess you emotionally, he must position himself before you. Here, an unconscious comparison occurs. He starts contrasting, he doesn't verbalize it, but he feels it. Your current presence versus the past version that always adapted. Your calm versus your old waiting. And this comparison generates internal tension, because before, your love was guaranteed. Now, your access isn't. And when access stops being secure, the male mind enters evaluation, not romantic, strategic. Do I rise or do I lose this place? This question marks a before and after. Many women think this is manipulation. No, it isn't. Manipulation would mean changing to provoke a reaction. Here you're not changing for him, you're changing for coherence with yourself. And this is felt differently. Your energy no longer pushes, doesn't ask, doesn't adapt. It simply is. And this stable presence without effort disarms more than any speech, because he can no longer lean on your emotional flexibility to stay the same. Now he must grow or feel uncomfortable until he leaves. In counseling, this point appears in their confused phrases, I don't know what's happening to me. I perceive her differently. Before it was simpler. Simple isn't love, it's access without consequences. And when that's lost, something new appears, real attention. Not always healthy, not always mature, but finally attention. Because your dignity forced his system to wake up, not from fear of losing you physically, but from the sensation of losing an internal place that gave him security without effort. And this is where many doubt and step back. When he starts approaching differently, measuring, being more attentive, the temptation to give in again appears. And there, everything is decided. Because if you use your dignity as strategy, it dilutes. But if you maintain it as identity, it solidifies. Jung would say, this is when the bond stops being projection and becomes conscious choice. And not everyone is ready to choose from there. And your dignity doesn't guarantee he'll stay. It guarantees something more important, that you won't lose yourself. And paradoxically, that has the most impact. Because you're no longer moving from fear of losing him, you're moving from respect for your internal axis. And this emotional autonomy changes the balance. He's no longer the evaluator. Now he's the one who must understand if he can match the coherence you embody without announcing it. This respect isn't born from sacrifice, it's born from boundaries. Not from drama, but from maintained calm. When you don't react from the wound but from clarity, he can no longer play at the same level as before. And this makes things uncomfortable, but also awakens. Because dignity doesn't seduce like attachment does, but it leaves a trace that doesn't erase easily, not even when the relationship ends. You become the internal reference, not the romantic memory. I want you to see this without idealizing. Some men grow before this, others withdraw. Both results are coherent. What changes is that you no longer negotiate your center to hold someone. And when your love is born from there, it stops being a constant offer. It becomes shared choice. This is the difference between being desired and being respected. And the male mind, even if he doesn't admit it, always knows when it's facing the latter. Third stage, initial male discomfort. What happens when he starts feeling fear, not of losing you, but of not being enough to keep you? There appear contradictory behaviors, approaches, and withdrawals, silent tests. And if you don't understand this point, you can confuse intensity with love. But if you do understand it, you'll remain steady while the dynamic completely reverses from within. It's not the childish fear of losing you, it's the adult fear of not measuring up. Here the male mind enters contradiction. He wants to get closer but fears exposing himself. He seeks you then withdraws, not because he's playing, but because his identity is reorganizing. Your dignity forces him to look at himself without the cushion of your availability. And this activates an internal anxiety, even if externally he shows calm or distance. This fear doesn't express itself in clear words. It appears as ambiguity, lukewarm messages, intense gestures. He's testing if you're still there, but no longer from the same place. And when he realizes you don't react like before, that you don't chase or complain, the unease grows, because now he can no longer regulate himself through your emotional reaction. Jung would call this a collision with the true self, without masks, and not everyone can bear that internal gaze. Many women misread this moment. They confuse intensity with progress, believe intermittent closeness is a sign of emerging love. Not always. Sometimes it's just a system trying to regain control. Your task isn't to decode it, but to stay firm. If you don't move from fear, if you don't fill the voids, he faces something new, his own void, and this encounter can transform him or make him flee. The important thing is this: listen calmly. Your dignity doesn't accelerate processes, it reveals them. If he approaches from presence, you'll feel it. If he approaches from fear, you'll feel that too. The difference is in the stability. Love born from fear needs constant proof that born from respect seeks growth. And you, by not abandoning your center, become the natural filter that distinguishes one from the other without saying a single word. At this point, the dynamic has already begun to reverse. Before, you were the one measuring timing, words, gestures. Now it's him. He watches, if you're still available, if something loosens, if you're adapting again. And when you don't, an uncomfortable but revealing sensation appears. He no longer has you secured. Not because you're leaving, but because you're no longer dependent. It's this emotional independence that reorganizes his perception of value more than anything. Jung stated that authentic desire is born when the other cannot be possessed, only found. Your dignity removes you from the place of emotional object and returns you to that of subject. And this changes the gaze. You're no longer the one who's always there, you're the one who chooses to be there. This difference seems subtle, but it completely transforms the experience of the bond. Because now he no longer relates to your dedication, but to your conscious presence. This is a delicate phase for you too, because if he shows fear or confusion, it can reawaken your old role, reassure, explain, support. Here is decided whether your dignity is identity or strategy. If you give energy back to the bond, the system returns to the familiar. If you maintain yourself, something new installs, not from coldness, but from internal coherence. And this coherence begins to require from him a clearer position. Some men at this point rise. They become more present, more emotionally responsible. Others weaken, not because you did wrong, but because the level rose and dignity doesn't negotiate altitude. You don't push, don't threaten, you simply don't descend. And this redefines the bond without confrontation, because true respect isn't imposed, it's embodied. And when it's embodied, it can no longer be ignored. I want you to observe something important. When he starts to change, it's not because you convinced him, it's because your integrity put him before himself. And when he doesn't change, it's not failure, it's information. Your dignity saves you years of confusion. It shows you who can meet you at the level you're at and who could only love you when you made yourself smaller. This clarity hurts at first, but it liberates long-term. Fourth stage, the adult fear of not being enough. In the next step, we'll enter the point of no return. When he understands he can no longer return to the version of you that bent, a definitive internal decision appears, not always conscious, but determining. And depending on how you maintain yourself at that point, this decision can transform him profoundly, or seal the ending with an elegance that wasn't possible before. The version of you that waited, that adapted, that yielded just to maintain things, she's not coming back. And this certainty doesn't arrive with a conversation, it arrives with an irreversible internal sensation. He can no longer provoke the same reaction in you, can no longer count on your emotional availability. Something has closed, not from resentment, but from coherence. And when this happens, his mind stops testing and starts deciding from a deeper place. Here appears a silent mourning. He doesn't cry your physical absence, he mourns the loss of a dynamic that gave him security without effort. And this hurts more than you imagine, because confronting a woman who doesn't back down forces acceptance of his own limits. Jung defined this point as the death of a projection. You no longer carry his voids. And when the projection falls, only two paths remain, mature or emotionally withdraw. If he decides to stay, the way he looks at you changes no longer from comfort, but from conscious respect. He begins to regulate himself, take emotional responsibility, measure what he offers. Not from fear of losing you, but because he understands he cannot keep you from the same level. Your dignity raised the standard without demanding it, and this movement redefines the bond. You're no longer refuge, you're encounter. And not everyone knows how to love from there. If he decides to go, even the closure is different. There's no persistent drama, no eternal back and forth. There's a clear sensation of internal boundary. You don't chase explanations, don't try to convince. And this leaves a trace. Because even if he leaves, he carries with him an impossible to erase reference, that of a woman who didn't negotiate her access for love. This image returns later, when other dynamics no longer suffice. This point is decisive for you because here usually appears the doubt. Was I too rigid? You were coherent. And coherence is never excess. Love that survives only if you shrink isn't love, it's dependence. Your dignity didn't destroy anything precious, it only revealed what couldn't sustain itself at your level. And even though it hurts to let go, something in you begins to rest. There's no more constant tension or silent self-abandonment. Jung would say, here begins your true individuation. You no longer define yourself by being chosen, but by choosing yourself. And this identity transforms all your future bonds. Because now you don't love from lack, you love from presence. You don't seek to be enough, you already are. And this energy changes how others approach, not by request, but by recognition. Your dignity becomes the natural filter. This step marks the definitive before and after. It doesn't matter if he returns or not. You never return to the version that waited for crumbs. And this is the real gain. Because now you know you don't need intensity to feel valuable, nor promises to stay. Your calm becomes home. And from there can only enter those who know how to inhabit it without trying to disturb it to feel superior. Many men remember this type of woman, not with romantic nostalgia, but with belated respect, because she showed the limit they couldn't cross. And that limit, far from shutting them out, put them before themselves. You didn't teach with discourse, you taught through embodiment. And that's what remains when everything else dissolves with time. I want you to breathe here, because this isn't a point of hardness, it's a point of calm. And you no longer have to sustain the unsustainable. No longer have to translate yourself to be loved. Your dignity didn't isolate you, it ordered you. And when you're ordered within, the outside begins to respond differently. Not always fast, not always simple, but always more authentic. Fifth stage, the point of no return. When you integrate dignity as identity, not as response to a wound, here you no longer act from the past, you act from presence. Your decisions don't seek an effect, they seek coherence. And this is noticed. Your yes has weight, your no rests. There's no urgency to define anything because you're already defined from within. This stability changes how others read you because there are no more emotional cracks through which to enter to negotiate your value. And at this point, love stops being continuous proof. You no longer need signals to feel secure. Your body is aligned with your boundaries, your word with your actions. And this congruence, so simple and so rare, becomes magnetic, not through seduction, but through clarity. Whoever approaches perceives it, and whoever can't sustain it withdraws without noise. Dignity doesn't argue, it orders the field. Here something subtle happens. You begin noticing you no longer hook into vague promises or intensity without direction. Your system recognizes the difference between presence and spectacle. This saves you time, energy, illusions. You don't become demanding, you become precise. And emotional precision is a language understood only by those ready to connect without games. The rest falls away by itself, without friction. Carl Jung spoke of integration as the act of stopping fragmenting yourself to please others. That's what you do here. You no longer separate what you feel from what you allow. You don't negotiate your intuition to maintain a bond. And when someone tries to cross a boundary, your body reacts before your words. There's no anger, there's an elegant withdrawal. And this withdrawal, far from closing the heart, protects it. This is the point where many say, I no longer attract the same type of people. Exactly. Because you no longer transmit from lack. Your dignity changes the frequency. You no longer call forth those who need to be held, but those who know how to hold themselves. And this doesn't guarantee quantity, it guarantees quality. Less noise, more truth. Less fear, more choice. Your love life doesn't simplify because you love less, but because you love yourself better. Here the memory of him loses force, not because he wasn't important, but because he no longer occupies center. The center is you. And from there the past orders itself without resentment. You're grateful for what you learned, and you move forward. There are no open accounts, there are internal closures. This is true liberation. Not when he returns or asks forgiveness, but when you no longer need him to be at peace. This change is noticed even in silence. You no longer explain your boundaries, don't justify your decisions, you simply act in coherence. and this coherence becomes your new normal. Whoever arrives late perceives it. There's no reproach, there's natural distance. Dignity doesn't build walls, it establishes thresholds, and only those who know how to cross them without invading enter. And when you look back, you understand something important. You didn't lose love. You gained internal structure. And this structure is the foundation of every healthy bond. Without it, love overflows in wounds. With it, love contains itself and grows. Jung would say here the bond stops being compensation and becomes true encounter. Two emotionally adult people who choose each other, not need each other. And this is the legacy of your dignity, not changing anyone, but moving yourself to another place. Leaving the role of constant option and inhabiting that of conscious choice. And from there, everything reorganizes. Your relationships, your energy, your decisions. You no longer chase, you attract presence. You no longer fear losing, you trust your capacity to choose better. And this energy changes how others approach, not by request, but by recognition. Sixth stage, integration as identity. When everything reconfigures from within, you no longer act by reaction, you act by identity. This is the point where dignity stops being a concept and becomes your natural way of being in the world. You don't ask yourself what to do for the other to stay. You ask if that bond honors what you are now, and this silent question guides every decision. There's no urgency, no fear, there's a firm calm that's no longer negotiable. And here something profound happens. Your nervous system learns that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with connection, or sacrifice with commitment. Your body recognizes when something is healthy and when it's not. And this internal intelligence saves infinite explanations. You don't have to close cycles with words, you close them with coherence. And that coherence is felt even in your silence, even when you say nothing. Many men don't forget a woman like this, not because she was perfect, but because she was whole. Because she didn't betray herself to be chosen. Because she showed, without speaking, what someone who respects themselves looks like. Jung said what isn't integrated repeats itself. And you broke the repetition. So you became an internal reference point for those who knew you. Not everyone recognizes it right away, but everyone remembers. This is the point where love stops being a psychological game. There are no more tests, strategies, roles to maintain. There's presence, mutual choice. And if there isn't, there's still peace. Because your value no longer depends on being desired, but on being faithful to yourself. This internal faithfulness is the foundation of every bond worth living. Without it, everything is negotiated. With it, everything orders itself. I want you to hear this with gentleness. Not everyone can love you from this level, and that's not a loss, it's natural purification. Your dignity doesn't exclude, it filters. It lets in those who can sustain a relationship without depending on your self-sacrifice. And even if the path becomes more selective, it also becomes lighter. Less noise, less confusion, more truth. And when you integrate all this, you no longer look back with guilt, but with understanding. You understand why you yielded, why you waited, why you adapted, and you also understand why you can't anymore, not because you're hard, but because you've grown. And growing means letting go of old versions of yourself. This too is self-esteem, one that doesn't have to prove itself, only sustain itself. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the most courageous act of the human being, becoming what you truly are, even if it means losing bonds that existed only through dependence. You've walked this path, and so you've changed the way you love, choose, and let yourself be chosen. You no longer seek to complete yourself, you share from your fullness. This is the love that doesn't consume. If this message reached you, stay a moment and leave a like. Subscribe to the channel. And if you want to carry all this with you, not as the emotion of a moment, but as an internal structure that stays, everything you've heard continues in the book, The Art of Detachment. It's the way to continue this path when the video is over. Small gestures that grow this space together with you. Tell me in the comments which part touched you most. Because when we share from truth, YouTube favors what we choose together. And this type of reflection only reaches those ready to hear it. Don't forget this when you close the video. Your dignity is not a barrier, it's a beacon. It doesn't chase love away, it orients it. And whoever comes toward you from now on will come knowing they can't take you for granted, but can find you through choice. This is the difference between a bond that consumes and one that sustains. Today you don't leave with techniques, but with an embodied truth. You don't have to prove your value, nor convince someone to stay. Your simple presence, aligned and firm, already says everything. As a final reminder, integrate it into one phrase that will accompany you from now on, because it defines your new place. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love. This phrase contains everything you've learned, everything you've become, and everything you'll never allow again. When you repeat it, it's not a threat, it's a declaration of peace with yourself. It's the moment you stop seeking external confirmation and become your own reference. It's the moment love stops being a question and becomes an answer you already possess. Because dignity isn't something obtained, it's something recognized. It's something that was always there, just covered by fears, expectations, versions of yourself you built to please. Today you discover it again, not as a weapon, but as a home. And from that home you no longer leave. Because when you return to yourself, when you recognize your value not from another's reaction, but from your internal coherence, something changes forever. And it's not a change seen right away. It's a change that's felt, breathed, embodied in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you choose. And others perceive it. They don't always understand it, but they perceive it. Because dignity has its own frequency, a vibration that can't be faked. Either you have it or you don't. And when you have it, the world around you reorganizes. Not because you ask it to, but because you embody it. This is true power, not the power to control others, but the power not to let others control you. This is true love, not what consumes you, but what sustains you. Not what asks you to become smaller, but what allows you to become greater. And when you love from there, when you love from your fullness and not your lack, everything changes. You no longer attract those who need you to feel important. You attract those who know how to recognize you for what you are. And this is the true transformation. It's not a technique, not a strategy, it's a return home. It's the moment you stop seeking outside what was always within. It's the moment your dignity stops being a question and becomes an answer. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love. This is your new identity, your new strength, your new love. Thank you for staying until the end.